dating these days. Right. It's like, where do you even begin?
Right.
It feels like everyone's got an opinion, but nobody's got the answers.
Well, maybe Logan Uri has some answers for us.
Oh, yeah. Her book, How to Not Die Alone.
That's the one. We're diving into it today, taking a deep dive to see what we can learn. See if she's really cracked the code.
I'm all for cracking the code. What's her big idea then?
Well, she's all about, like, blending this relationship science with behavioral science, to give us some practical advice, stuff we can actually use.
Okay, so it's not just another self-help book full of vague platitudes.
No. This is about getting real, getting to the root of why we do what we do when it comes to love.
So what are we doing wrong?
Well, she talks about these dating blind spots we all have.
Blind spots, like metaphorically speaking.
Yeah, exactly. They're like these patterns, right? Patterns that keep us stuck in these same old frustrating dating cycles.
Ugh, I know those cycles all too well.
Yeah.
What are these patterns then?
So she talks about 3 main dating tendencies: the romanticizer, the maximizer, and the hesitator.
Ooh. The hesitator, that sounds familiar. Okay, break it down for me. What's a romanticizer?
Okay, so the romanticizer, they're big on the idea of the one,
Soulmates and all that.
Yeah, like destiny, meant to be. She uses this example of Maya in the book.
Maya?
Yeah, Maya, who's convinced that love will just magically appear,
Oh, I've been there, waiting for Prince Charming to come sweep me off my feet.
It's a classic, right? The fairy tale ending. But the problem is, well, it's a fallacy,
The fairy tale.
It's fallacy.
Yeah, she calls it the happily ever after fallacy. Uri points out that this idea of the one and living happily ever after, it's actually like a pretty new idea, historically speaking.
Really? I always thought people have been obsessed with romantic love forever.
Nope, not really. Back in the day, love wasn't always the main reason people got hitched. It was more about like practical stuff, family, economic, social standing, all that. Interesting. So we've been sold this bill of goods about romantic love.
Kind of, yeah. And the problem with that is it sets us up for disappointment because, well, it ignores the reality that relationships actually take effort, real effort.
So no more fairy tales.
I mean, fairy tales are fun, but yeah, we need to ditch that happily ever after mindset and embrace the reality that relationships, they're a work in progress.
So ditch the Prince Charming fantasy and roll up our sleeves, huh?
That's a great way to put it. It's about being willing to put in the work, to build a strong, lasting partnership.
Okay, got it. No more passively waiting for love to find me. What's next?
All right, so we've got the maximizer.
The maximizer. Lay it on me.
Okay, so picture this guy, Stephen. He makes a spreadsheet, right?
A spreadsheet? For what?
To rank potential partners, like literally ranking them based on like all these criteria. He's all about maximizing his options, but it backfires,
Backfires how?
Well, it leads to endless searching and this fear of missing out, right? FOMO.
FOMO. Yeah, I've heard of that. So too many choices is a bad thing.
It can be, especially for maximizers. They get so caught up in finding the best possible partner that they miss out on perfectly good matches, like amazing people who they just dismiss because, they're so focused on the what if, on someone better being out there.
It's almost like they're afraid to commit because what if they choose the wrong person?
Exactly. It's paralyzing. So what Uri suggests is like setting a good enough benchmark, to avoid that endless searching.
Good enough, huh? That's a tough one for some people, I bet.
Oh, absolutely. But it's about finding that balance between like having standards and being realistic.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, what about the hesitator? That one definitely rings a bell for me.
The hesitator, right? Always waiting for the right time to date.
Oh, the right time. That mythical creature.
But that time never seems to arrive, does it?
Never. It's always, I need to lose 5 pounds first, or I need to finish this project, or I need to, reorganize my sock drawer. Always something.
Yeah, always an excuse, right? But Uri's point is nobody is ever truly ready to date. It's about taking action and, learning as you go. Like, dating is a skill, right?
So, just jump in and figure it out as you go along?
Pretty much. She talks about Jing in the book, a classic hesitator. She kept putting off dating until she felt ready.
What happened to Jing?
Well, with a little coaching, she realized that dating, it's like anything else. You get better with practice,
So instead of waiting on the sidelines, she got in the game.
Exactly. And she learned a ton along the way.
That's encouraging. Okay, so we've got these blind spots. What else? What else is messing us up?
Well, let's talk about attachment theory. This is where things get really interesting.
Attachment theory, like how we're attached to our phones.
No. Think more like childhood, our early experiences. Ori argues that those experiences can have a huge impact on how we approach relationships as adults.
Like, if you had a secure, loving childhood, you're more likely to have healthy relationships.
Exactly. And on the flip side, if you had like some rough stuff early on, it can show up in your dating patterns.
That makes sense. So what are the different attachment styles then?
Okay, so the main ones are anxious, avoidant, and secure. So anxious folks, they're often like worried about their partner's love and availability. You know, they need a lot of reassurance.
And what about the avoidant types?
They're the ones who like tend to be uncomfortable with intimacy. They might pull away when things start to get too close.
Oh, yeah. I can see how those two styles would clash.
Oh, yeah. It can create some serious drama. And then you've got the secure folks. They're like the gold standard.
So the securely attached folks, they're the ones who have it all figured out.
Pretty much. They're comfortable with both closeness and independence. Yuri tells this story of Vivian.
Vivian.
Yeah, she was stuck in this like anxious avoidant loop, always falling for partners who were emotionally unavailable.
So it's like she was attracted to what was familiar, even if it wasn't healthy for her.
Exactly. But, you know, she eventually broke free from that pattern.
That's good to hear. How did she do that?
Well, she started by like understanding her attachment style and how it was like driving her choices. And then she did the work to like heal those old wounds and develop a more secure attachment style.
So it's possible to change your attachment style.
Yeah, it takes effort, but it's definitely possible. And the reward is, well, healthier, happier relationships.
Okay, so we've got our blind spots, we've got our attachment styles. What about like the actual process of finding a partner? How do we know if someone's right for us? Is it all about shared interests and that spark?
The spark. It's tempting to think that, isn't it? But Shuri actually debunks a lot of those myths. Like she says, you don't need to have everything in common with your partner. In fact, sometimes focusing on those superficial similarities can distract us from what really matters.
Okay, so what does matter then? What should we be looking for instead of just ticking off boxes on a checklist?
She highlights these 6 crucial traits, right? Kindness, emotional stability, a growth mindset, compatibility, the ability to fight well, and the ability to make hard decisions together.
Wow, that's a mouthful. But those sound like solid qualities.
They are, right.
Yeah.
It's about finding someone who's like good for you, not just good on paper.
Okay, all of this is great in theory, but let's be real for a second. A lot of us are turning to dating apps to find partners. What does Yuri have to say about that?
Right. Well, she acknowledges that apps can be a convenient way to meet people, but she also warns about some potential pitfalls. Like, one big issue is that, well, apps tend to emphasize like superficial traits. You know, it's all about the photos, the quick bio, the swipe left or right.
So it's easy to get caught up in appearances rather than like who the person actually is.
Totally.
Yeah.
And that can lead to like a lot of wasted time and, well, disappointment. Because you're not really getting to know the person. You know, you're just judging them based on like a curated version of themselves.
It's like a highlight reel, not the actual movie.
Perfect analogy. And, you know, Yuri reminds us that people are what she calls experience goods, meaning you can't really know someone until you've like spent time with them, experienced them firsthand.
So how do we avoid getting lost in the endless swiping and, you know, the superficiality of the app world?
Well, for starters, just be aware of how the apps are designed, right? They're designed to keep you engaged, to keep you swiping. So be mindful of that and don't let the apps like dictate your choices. Remember what you're actually looking for in a partner and, you know, use the apps as a tool to like connect with people who share your values and goals.
Okay, so maybe the apps aren't the magic solution we thought they were.
Yeah, it's not as simple as just swiping right, unfortunately.
Right. So what are some other ways to meet people, like in real life? I mean, besides the apps?
Well, she suggests using what she calls the event decision matrix. It's basically a way to like identify promising events based on, well, 2 things really. 1, how much you'll enjoy the event itself, and 2, how likely you are to meet new people there.
So it's about finding events that like align with your interests and also provide opportunities for socializing.
Exactly. Think about it like, are you going to have a good time regardless of whether you meet someone special? And is it an environment where you can actually strike up conversations with people?
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So ditch the random bar crawls and like actually think about what kind of events would be both fun and conducive to meeting people.
Exactly. And, you know, don't forget the power of like asking your friends and family to set you up.
Oh, the dreaded setup.
I know. But seriously, people often want to help, but they just like don't know how. So be specific, right? Tell them what you're looking for and, make it easy for them to connect you with potential matches.
It's like giving them a job description for your ideal partner.
Exactly. And you never know, they might just know the perfect person.
Okay, so we've got the event decision matrix, we've got the friend setups. Any other tips for meeting people IRL?
This might sound scary, but don't underestimate the power of simply like introducing yourself to strangers in public.
Like just walk up to someone and start talking to them?
Yeah, like at the coffee shop, the bookstore, even the grocery store,
That's a bold move.
It is, but Yuri cites all this research showing that we often underestimate how much we'll actually enjoy interacting with strangers. It's about being open to those serendipitous encounters,
Okay, so be open, be bold, strike up conversations. Got it.
Exactly. You never know where you'll meet someone special.
All right, so let's say we've met someone, whether it's online or in real life. Now it's time for the dreaded first date. Any tips on how to make it less awkward and more meaningful?
Ooh, first dates. Yeah, they can be, a mixed bag. But Yuri has some great advice for this, too. She talks about, experiential dating, which is basically, choosing activities that, allow you to see different sides of your date's personality.
So instead of just, sitting across a table from each other, sipping lukewarm coffee, we should be doing something more, engaging.
Exactly. Think, cooking classes, bike rides, museum visits, anything that sparks conversation and allows you to connect on a deeper level.
So skip the boring dinner and a movie routine and actually do something fun and memorable.
Exactly. And speaking of conversation, Yuri is adamant about ditching the small talk.
Oh, thank goodness. Small talk is the worst.
Right. So she suggests entering the date in media res, jumping right into a more engaging conversation.
So how do you do that?
Well, you could share an anecdote, ask for advice, or discuss a topic you're both passionate about, something that gets the conversation flowing,
It's like skipping the boring intro and getting right to the good stuff.
Exactly. And of course, put those phones away.
Oh yeah, that's a big one. Nothing kills the mood faster than someone constantly checking their notifications.
Right. It's about being present, giving your date your undivided attention.
Okay, the date is over. Now what? How do we decide if we want to see this person again? Is it all about that initial spark?
Ah, the spark. That's a tricky one. Yuri actually challenges the conventional wisdom about the spark.
Wait, you're telling me the spark isn't everything?
It's not that it's not important, but it can be misleading. It's not always a good indicator of long-term compatibility.
So just because you feel a spark, it doesn't necessarily mean you found the one.
Exactly. Sometimes a spark is just superficial attraction.
Yeah.
It can be fleeting. Yuri gives this example of a couple who fell head over heels at Burning Man.
Burning Man. Wow, that's intense.
Right. So they had this crazy connection, all this passion, but later when they were back in the real world, they realized It wasn't sustainable,
So the spark fizzled out.
Pretty much. It turns out they didn't really have much in common outside of that shared experience.
So what's the alternative to chasing the spark?
Well, Yuri encourages us to embrace what she calls the slow burn.
The slow burn.
Yeah, it's the idea that attraction can grow gradually as you get to know someone on a deeper level.
So it's about discovering those hidden gems that make someone truly special.
Exactly. And sometimes that takes time. It's about looking beyond the initial surface level attraction and seeing what's underneath,
Okay, so we've been on a few dates. We're starting to develop feelings for this person. Now what?
Well, now might be time for the dreaded define the relationship conversation, the DTR.
Oh, the DTR. That can be terrifying.
It can be, yeah.
Can be.
But it's important, Yuri emphasizes the importance of being direct and honest about your expectations. It's about having a real conversation, a vulnerable conversation about where you see the relationship going.
That's easier said than done, though, right? What if you scare them away?
I know, it's scary, but, avoiding the conversation just leads to, confusion and hurt feelings down the line.
True. So better to be upfront and honest from the start.
Exactly. She tells this story about Jing again. Remember Jing, the hesitator?
Yeah, I remember Jing.
So she was dating this guy, James, and she just assumed, right, because he'd introduced her to his friends and family that, he was serious about her.
Sounds pretty serious to me.
Right. But then when they finally had the DTR conversation, she realized They were on totally different pages.
Ouch, that's rough.
Yeah, it was a tough lesson learned. But it highlighted, like, how important it is to have those conversations to make sure you're both on the same page.
Communication is key, right?
Absolutely. Clear, open, honest communication.
Okay, so we've defined the relationship, and let's say things are going well. What's the next big hurdle? Moving in together.
Cohabitation. That's a big one, isn't it?
It feels like a natural progression, you know?
Yeah.
Date for a while, then move in together.
It does, right. And it's becoming more and more common. But Uri actually, like, cautions against seeing it as, like, a risk-free trial run for marriage.
Wait, so living together before marriage might not be the best idea.
It's not that it's always a bad idea, but, like, the research actually suggests that couples who live together before marriage are more likely to get divorced than those who don't.
Really? That's surprising. Why do you think that is?
Well, Uri's theory is that, like, couples often slide into cohabitation without, like, really having those crucial conversations about their long-term goals, you know?
So it's like they're just going with the flow instead of making a conscious, intentional decision.
Exactly. She uses this example of Priya and Catherine, who, like, discovered during their DTR conversation that they had, like, totally different views on what moving in together actually meant for them.
Oh, that could be a recipe for disaster.
Right. So it's about being intentional about the decision, you know, not just letting it happen, talking it through, making sure you're both on the same page about, like, what it means for your relationship, for your future.
Okay, so cohabitation, proceed with caution. Got it. Now, all this talk about defining the relationship and moving in together, it brings up another big question, right? Like, how do we know when it's time to end a relationship?
Ooh, that's a tough one. And there's no easy answer. But Uri, she talks about these two tendencies people have when they're facing this dilemma, right? The ditchers and the hitchers.
The ditchers and the hitchers. Okay, I'm intrigued.
So the ditchers, they're the ones who, like, bail at the first sign of trouble, you know, any little conflict, and they're out.
And the hitchers.
They're the ones who hang on for dear life, even when, like, they're miserable.
So how do we find that balance between, like, ditching too soon and, like, staying too long?
Right. It's tricky, but Uri suggests asking herself some, like, key questions, like, am I bringing my best self to this relationship? Is my partner bringing out the best in me? Are we growing together? Are we meeting each other's needs?
Those are some deep questions.
They are, right. But they're important. It's about taking an honest look at the relationship and, like, assessing whether it's truly serving both partners.
And if it's not?
Well, then it might be time to consider moving on, as hard as that is.
Okay, so we've done the soul searching, and let's say we've decided it's time to end the relationship. How do we actually do it? Like, how do we break up with someone in a way that, you know, minimizes the pain and preserves some dignity?
Breakups are the worst, right? But Uri gives some helpful advice for, like, breaking up with compassion. First of all, like, have a plan. Don't just blurt it out randomly. Choose a time and place where you can have a private conversation.
So no breakup texts.
Definitely not. And, you know, avoid breaking up in public, too. That's just, like, cruel.
It's about having some respect for the other person, even when it's difficult.
Exactly. And when you do have the conversation, be direct and honest, but also be kind. Avoid blaming or criticizing your partner, you know?
So no, it's not you, it's me kind of stuff.
Well, sometimes it really is them. But yeah, the point is to focus on your own reasons for wanting to end the relationship. Take ownership of your decision.
Okay, so be direct, be honest, be kind. Got it. What about after the breakup? How do we deal with the heartbreak?
Heartbreak is tough. But Forey offers some, like, helpful reframes for navigating it. One thing she suggests is, like, focusing on the positive aspects of the breakup.
Wait, the positive aspects of a breakup? How is that even possible?
I know, it sounds counterintuitive, but, like, by focusing on the gains, you can start to shift your perspective, you know? Ask yourself, like, what did I learn about myself in this relationship? What do I want differently in my next partner? What are some things I can do now that I couldn't do when I was in the relationship?
So it's like turning the heartbreak into an opportunity for growth.
Exactly. It's about, like, reclaiming your independence and rediscovering parts of yourself that might have been, like, neglected during the relationship.
Turning lemons into lemonade, huh?
Pretty much. And remember, healing takes time. You know, be patient with yourself and allow yourself to grieve the loss of the relationship.
No rushing into rebound relationships.
Not a good idea, no. It's about honoring your emotions and, like, allowing yourself to process the experience fully. And while you're healing, you know, focus on self-care. Connect with supportive friends and family. Engage in activities that, like, bring you joy.
It's about remembering who you are outside of the relationship.
Exactly. And rediscovering all the amazing things about yourself.
This has been so insightful, really. But I feel like we've only just scratched the surface of what Uri has to offer in How to Not Die Alone.
Oh, we've just begun. There's so much more to explore.
So we've talked about all the challenges, right? Like finding a partner, going on dates, dealing with breakups, all that. But what happens when we do actually find someone? Like, how do we make it last?
Yeah, that's the real question, isn't it? The happily ever after. But Yuri's book doesn't stop at just finding a partner. She gets into the nitty-gritty of building a relationship, like a real lasting one.
So it's not just about riding off into the sunset together. There's more to it.
Oh, way more. Uri's big on this idea of, like, intentionality, you know? It's not enough to just find the right person. You got to put in the effort.
Okay, so how do we do that? Like, what are some things we can do to keep that spark alive and make sure things don't, like, fizzle out?
Well, she talks about these decision points.
Decision points?
Yeah, they're like these moments in a relationship where you have to, like, make a choice about how to move forward.
Can you give me an example?
Sure. Think about moving in together. That's a big decision, right? And it's often something couples just kind of, I don't know, slide into without really thinking it through.
I can see how that could be a problem. So what's the alternative? How do we approach these decision points with more, I guess, intention?
Uri's big on communication, like really talking things through. She even suggests creating, get this, a relationship contract.
A contract? That sounds kind of intense.
I know, right? But it doesn't have to be like a legal document or anything. It's more about just like getting everything out in the open, you know, talking about your expectations, your needs, your deal breakers.
So it's like a roadmap for the relationship.
Exactly. And it can actually be kind of fun to do, you know, like sit down with your partner and be like, okay, what do we want this to look like?
Yeah, that actually does sound kind of romantic.
Right. And it can prevent a lot of misunderstandings and arguments down the road.
Okay, so relationship contract, check. What about another big decision point like marriage?
Marriage. Well, there's no magic formula, right? But Uri suggests having these deep conversations.
Deep conversations about what?
About everything. Your past, your present, your future. She calls them "it's about time" conversations.
Okay, so it's like really getting to know each other on a deeper level, even if you think you already do.
Exactly. Talking about your childhoods, your values, your dreams, and also, you know, the not so fun stuff like finances and family dynamics.
The stuff that can cause problems later on if you don't talk about it.
Exactly. It's like a pre-marriage checkup,
Yeah.
making sure you're on the same page before you know, make that lifelong commitment.
I like that, a pre-marriage checkup.
And if you're struggling to have these conversations on your own, she really recommends premarital counseling.
Wait, therapy? Before you even get married?
Yeah, it might seem counterintuitive, but like it can be so helpful. You know, you learn communication skills, you address any underlying issues that might be there.
It's like investing in the relationship before you make it official.
Exactly. And even if you're already married, it's never too late for couples therapy.
So therapy is not just for couples who are, like, on the verge of divorce.
No, not at all. It can be a preventative measure, too. It's like going to the dentist for a checkup, you know?
Okay, I'm getting that. So what about keeping things, I don't know, exciting in the day-to-day? Like, how do we avoid getting into a rut?
Right. Well, Uri suggests creating rituals, you know, and traditions together, like date nights, weekend getaways, little surprises for each other.
So it's about making an effort, even when you've been together for a while.
Totally. It's those little things that make a big difference.
It's like reminding yourselves why you chose each other in the first place.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be anything fancy or expensive. It's the thought that counts.
Speaking of things that count, let's talk about money.
Ooh, yeah, money. Not exactly the most romantic topic.
No, but it can cause a lot of problems if you're not on the same page.
Totally. Yuri's a big advocate for open communication about money.
So talk about it early and often.
Exactly. Set a budget together, be transparent about spending habits, all that.
It's about being a team, right, when it comes to finances.
Exactly. And if you're struggling, you know, you can always seek guidance from a financial advisor.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, from finding a partner to building a strong relationship. What's, like, the key takeaway? What do you hope people remember from this deep dive?
I think Uri sums it up perfectly when she says, you know, love may not always be easy, but it's definitely worth the effort.
That's a good one. But you know what? There's one more thing I want to ask you about before we wrap things up.
Okay, what's that?
Uri mentions this idea of choosing a partner who is good at life. What does she mean by that?
Oh, yeah. I love that part of the book. It's about finding someone who is, like, responsible, capable, you know?
So not just someone who sweeps you off your feet, but someone who can also handle the practical stuff.
Exactly. Someone who can, like, pay bills on time, keep a tidy home, remember to pick up the dry cleaning.
The little things that can actually make a big difference in a relationship.
Totally. It's about finding someone who's a true partner in every sense of the word. Someone who supports you, challenges you, and makes life, like, more fun and fulfilling.
I love that. So we're looking for someone who's good at life and good at love.
Exactly. It's the best of both worlds.
Okay, so we've reached the end of our deep dive into How to Not Die Alone. What are your final thoughts? Would you recommend this book?
Absolutely. I think everyone can learn something from this book. You know, whether you're single, dating, or already in a relationship, it's about ditching those fairy tales, embracing the reality of relationships, and, like, approaching love with intention.
It's about taking control of our own love stories.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining me on this deep dive. It's been a pleasure chatting with you.
Likewise. It's been fun.
I'm really struck by how practical Yuri's book is. It's not just theory,
Yeah.
It's like she gives you actual tools to use.
Yeah. And those stories, right, the examples from real people, that makes it so much more relatable.
Totally. And it's not all sunshine and roses either, which I appreciate. She gets into the messy stuff too.
Yeah, she doesn't sugarcoat it, does she? Like heartbreak and those tough conversations and knowing when to, like, walk away.
It's refreshing to hear someone talk about relationships, like, realistically, because so much of what we see out there is just like this idealized version of love.
Right, but real relationships, they're messy, they take work, and sometimes they end.
Exactly. It's not always a fairy tale. But what I also like about Yuri's approach is that she emphasizes, like, it's okay to ask for help.
Yeah, you don't have to go it alone. There are resources out there.
Right, whether it's therapy or talking to friends or, hey, even reading a book like this.
It's all about finding what works for you, right?
Exactly. Okay, so I'm curious, are there any specific tools or exercises in the book that, like, really stood out to you?
Oh, let me think. There are so many good ones. Oh, there's this one, the Post-Date 8.
It's a Post-Date 8.
Yeah, it's like 8 questions you ask yourself after a date to help you, like, reflect on the experience.
Oh, that's interesting. Like, to help you decide if you want to see them again.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not just the usual stuff, like, did we have fun? Are they attractive? It's deeper than that.
Give me an example. Like, what's one of the questions?
Okay, so one of them is, how did this person make me feel about myself?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Right. It's not just about them. It's about how they make you feel. Like, did they make you feel seen, heard, respected?
I think that's so important. We often get caught up in, like, the logistics of dating that we forget to pay attention to how someone actually makes us feel.
Totally. And it can tell you a lot about, whether they're a good match for you.
Okay, I like that one.
Yeah.
What else? What are some other questions?
Let's see. Oh, this is a good one. Did I feel calm and comfortable around this person?
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's about, like, trusting your gut, If something feels off, it probably is.
I love that she emphasizes that, like, trusting your instincts. Because it's so easy to ignore those red flags, especially when you're, like, really into someone.
Right. But those gut feelings are usually right.
Okay, so we've got the Post-Date 8. Any other tools that come to mind?
Well, we talked about the relationship contract, right?
That's a big one.
That's really helpful for, like, couples who are serious about, building a future together. It's about getting on the same page, talking about everything from finances to, like, household chores to, well, sex.
Yeah, all the important stuff.
Exactly. And it's great because she gives you, like, prompts and questions to help guide the conversation.
That makes it so much easier, right? Because sometimes it's hard to know where to start with those conversations.
Totally. It can be intimidating, but having those prompts, it just, like, takes the pressure off.
Okay, so the Post-Date 8, the relationship contract. I'm seriously impressed with, like, how practical this book is.
Me too. And it's not just practical. It's, like, it's well written, you know?
Yeah.
Engaging, relatable. You can tell she really cares about this stuff.
Yeah, I could definitely feel that. Okay, so we've talked about a lot. Any final thoughts you want to leave our listeners with?
Let me think. I think the biggest takeaway for me is that, like, we have more control than we think we do, when it comes to our love life. It's not about waiting for love to find us. It's about, like, going out there and creating it.
I love that. Creating our own love story.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap things up. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive into How to Not Die Alone. It's been such a pleasure.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
And to our listeners, thanks for tuning in. Remember, love might not be easy, but it's worth the effort.